Before I go to bed at night, I usually like to browse through the news because I like bad dreams. Last night, I came across an interesting article that really piqued my interest. From the Los Angeles Times, Are Video Games the New Comic Book Movies for Hollywood? One producer thinks so, by Ryan Fondner. I'm so sorry, Ryan, if I botched your name, I do apologize. However, I wasn't even able to read your article because it is behind the Apple News Plus paywall. But joke's on you, Apple News Plus. I don't need to break through your paywall because, lo and behold, this article spoke to me more than anything because this is incredibly relevant to my recent struggles here on the channel when I was pivoting content, trying to look for something that I could do, scurrying to find some form of content to produce that was not relevant to film or television during the SAG-AFTRA strike. Something that was fair game was playing video games. However, I wanted to show as much solidarity as possible and not stream any video games that came from or were inspired by IPs that were currently being struck against. So for example, Spider-Man, Battlefront. But in the process of doing my research, I also wanted to just do a quick search to see how many of these video games had existing, film or television adaptations in the works. And holy shnikes, almost every video game, it seems, has a film or TV project in the works. Not all necessarily live action. There are some rumored animated shows in the works, but holy shnikes, everything. Let's just go through a brief list. Now, there are obviously a plethora of games across many different consoles. I think I'm focusing primarily on, PlayStation because that's my preferred console, but this search of mine, this was brief. I literally did like 30 minutes of just searching, not extensive at all, but just to give you an idea. Horizon Zero Dawn series, all you need to know about the upcoming video game adaptation. Horizon Zero Dawn is an action-adventure, I would describe also a sci-fi series available to play on PlayStation. This article came out in 2023. After HBO's The Last of Us, it looks like Netflix too is seriously looking at video game adaptations. This is true. We will get into this. Legend of Zelda. From Esquire. The Legend of Zelda movie, Everything We Know. Nintendo officially announced that a live-action Link will grace the big screen. And of course, Legend of Zelda is action-adventure. This was published by Josh Rosenberg on November 9th, fresh this year, 2023. God of War, action-adventure. I would also argue fantastical. There's like 12 games, I think, in the series. From Collider, God of War live-action series, plot, creators, and what to expect. PlayStation Productions are adapting another of their most beloved video games. This is by Jake Hodges, published June 19th, 2023. Take note of the already evident date publishing pattern here. We will discuss that. I should also note that I've not played every single one of these games, but I have heard of the majority of them, if not every single one of them. I was aware of the franchise, at least, just haven't played all of them, so if I'm incorrectly describing these games in their genres, feel free to correct me. Moving on to BioShock. This is a retro-futuristic, I would argue, sci-fi, but again, correct me if I am wrong. This is from GamingBible.com. BioShock film gets promising update from Netflix by Emma Flint. This was published October 2023. Next up, Dark Souls, which is an action role-playing game. According to Eurogamer.net, Dark Souls reportedly being turned into a Netflix anime. This is from author Victoria Kennedy, reported on 28th of July, 2023. Looks like Dark Souls anime is in the works. According to Giant Freaking Robot, an anime based on From Software's dark medieval fantasy games is being developed for Netflix. Next up, Final Fantasy, which is obviously fantasy. This is from Looper, live-action Final Fantasy TV series in the works. Sony Pictures Television and video game developer, publisher, and distributor Square Enix has announced that a live-action Final Fantasy television series is underway. Assassin's Creed action-adventure, open-world epicness. This is straight from Ubisoft.com. Live-action Assassin's Creed series coming to Netflix. Unclear when this was released, but according to this blurb, a brand new live-action Assassin's Creed series is coming to Netflix. This deal includes multiple different series, the first of which will be a genre-bending live-action epic, while the others will be animated and anime adaptations. Makes sense because Assassin's Creed has quite a lot of games in its arsenal, so quite a lot of source material they could draw from. So whilst editing, I found in my research that there's already an Assassin's Creed film that came out in 2016 starring Michael Fassbender, so
correction there. There was already a film adaptation, but cool that there will be a series now.
Ghosts of Tsushima. Really want to play this game. According to GamingBible.com, Ghosts of Tsushima TV series teased alongside a movie. This was written by Catherine Lewis, published on the 20th of June, 2023. Of all the video game adaptations currently in the works, the Ghosts of Tsushima movie might be the most exciting. Next up, Elden Ring, fantastical action-adventure. According to ggrecon.com, an Elden Ring TV series could finally be on the way. Published by Tom Chapman, 4th of August, 2023. Game of Thrones, The Witcher, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, and more. If we've learned anything, it's that fantasy epics still mean big business on the small screen, and I will talk about that later. Alan Wake, psychological thriller. According to IGN.com, Alan Wake TV show in development at AMC. This is written by Matt Kim, published on May 12th, 2022. Death Stranding, which I would describe as sci-fi. Again, have not played, so feel free to correct me if I miss describing these. According to TheVerge.com, Death Stranding is getting a film adaptation. The news also comes at a time when seemingly every big-name video game is being adapted, from The Last of Us on HBO to God of War on Prime Video. And finally, Mass Effect, which is a military science fiction game, from PCGamer.com. Everything we know about the Mass Effect TV series, published by Len Hafer on April 17th, 2022. Feel free to critique my sources here, but the point is, chances are if you Google any video game followed by TV adaptation ? Even if it's just a Reddit thread of fans of the game wanting and demanding a live action adaptation, you will find at least even just rumors of a reported adaptation in the works.
Not to say that any of the authors behind any of these articles were publishing rumors. I totally believe the validity of all of their writing here, all of their reporting. Literally, some of these sources were like IGN and Ubisoft themselves. So I don't want to discredit the authors of those articles in any way, shape, or form. I just want to make it clear I do not think that they are spreading rumors, but rather point out that in conjunction with actual, valid, legitimate news articles and platforms announcing film or television adaptations of many of these games, in conjunction with that, even if there is not an official announcement, I'm sure there are so many other rumored games in the works that are being developed into film or television. So I don't want to question any of these authors here. I appreciate all of their reporting. They are doing the Lord's work.
And if you did note, a lot of these were published in either 2022 or 2023. So, per the article that I was unable to read, predicting that there is about to be a boom, the pipeline of video game to television, and if not, there were some movie adaptations in there as well, I believe, but notably mostly TV. Why now? Like, why is this happening? Obviously, of course, as many of those noted, there's recent success of series like The Witcher and The Last of Us, but what is prompting this segue from comic books necessarily being the source material, as we've seen with Marvel, that was dominating the scene for quite a long time, but we're seeing now a transition to video games. Clearly, this was just a list of 12, and I cut it off at that number just because I'm lazy, not because I couldn't find any more. I'm sure if you do your own research, or if there's another game that's not on this list that I included that you're interested in, like I said, you could probably Google and at least even find rumors of reports, or that the rights were sold to a streaming studio or something like that. And everything going forward is just my own brief research. I did not do the most thorough job here, but this is all, personal opinion. I'm not a scientist. I am a mediocre gamer at best, so I don't want this to sound like I'm coming from a place of I'm speaking the gospel here. This is all just my own speculation, but as I mentioned, it piqued my own interest. Like, why is this happening? You don't have to do much context clues to look at recent history here. From 2020 plus, many of us were forced to become introverted, whether we naturally are or not, and video games, I would argue, are inherently great for people, introverts like myself. My ideal Friday night is honestly sitting in with my husband playing video games. We both really just enjoy that. And for a long time, video games were, regarded as, oh, it's rotting your brain, waste of time. And I'm sure that taboo and stereotype still exists. But if you look at 2020, when cinemas were closed, couldn't go outside, I'm sure a lot of people retreated to video games. According to Statista.com here, there was an increase in video game sales during that time period as of March 2020. And as they note, there was a huge impact in the entertainment industry. You could not go to a theater, so what could you do? Download a new game on the PlayStation, you know, the brand new, conveniently released PS5.
Welcome to the future!
PS5, brand new, shiny, futuristic PS5 launched in November of 2020. And if you lived in an urban area during that time, you can relate to the absolute struggle that it was to try to get your hands on one of those things. This was the gamers' equivalent of trying to secure Taylor Swift tickets, okay? I'm not even kidding. It was cutthroat. Tom and I would be there with multiple devices. I would be on my phone in a queue and on my laptop in a queue. And the second the queue would go live, they would sell out and immediately be out of stock. We literally had to fight tooth and nail to just get our hands on one. It was hot commodity. It was incredibly coveted. Again, this was just my experience living in Los Angeles, one of the most populated cities, where it was extremely hard to try to get our hands on one. But of course, it was an incredibly successful launch for Sony. Again, according to Statista, they racked up some 4.5 million units in sales during that initial release quarter. And the PlayStation 5 ranked as the best-selling current generation console of 2023. Sony just announced that they've sold 40 million units. I love how they even have to note in this press release, the PS5 is well stocked now, and we are seeing that pent-up demand finally being met. So even they acknowledge this was a super hot commodity. This was an incredibly successful launch. So even though that's the extent of my research, brief, albeit on the subject, whether you liked it or not, we were all forced to be a little bit more introverted and had to retreat to our screens, which we were all in front of, still are, you know, it's still happening from 2020 on. Couldn't go hang out with your friends, so best option was to hop into a gaming lobby. That's the only way that you could actually like socialize and hang out with people while playing a fun game. All of that paired with the launch of one of the most highly anticipated new gaming consoles is a perfect storm. So I would not be surprised if during all of this timeline, video game sales surged. There are 40 million people, you know, playing on just a PS5, and that's just new next generation console. Whatever you're playing on, I would not be surprised if you started to play a little bit more within the past 3 years, because we had no choice. But I would also argue that game quality and video game development has totally improved in the past few years, and video games now more than ever, the quality is insane, and you have remasterings like The Last of Us coming out exclusively on the PS5. You know, there is a demand for super good quality. Everyone wants to get their hands on it, even just playing the remastered version of a game that they've already played. And so, what is the benefit of adapting video games to a live-action television series? Obviously, you already have a huge pre-existing fan base. That does not hurt, and it certainly helps, I imagine, if you want to get a show greenlit, to have proof in the pudding that there will be people watching it, and most likely, those people are introverts who have the time on their hands and would be invested and interested in watching a series inspired by their favorite game. Again, I don't have stats about this, but I think it's a lot easier to create a new series catering to a pre-existing audience than to start basically from the ground up. Granted, it can be done, but I also think it's worth noting, as I pointed out, the genres of a lot of those series are fantastical, action-adventure, sci-fi, and in my personal opinion, I think that fantasy and sci-fi are more popular now than ever, and it's only going to continue to surge in the film and television space.
You ever been to a convention? Go to one and you'll understand how fun they are.
I will say this till the day that I die. I will stand on this hill regardless of how you felt about the show, the way it concluded. I think Game of Thrones permanently altered the scene when it comes to large-scale, large-budget, fantastical shows. When that show first came out, I feel like there was still such a stigma around, oh, I'm not gonna watch that dragons show, you know? I'm sure if you're a fan of the show, you can hear somebody in your life with that voice saying that exact line. We all heard it.
You don't watch Game of Thrones, do you? You make me sick! Get out of here!
But thanks to Game of Thrones, it frickin' surged in popularity, and I'm sure some of you might know people who used to hold that opinion and then became huge fans of the show because it was epic. And at the time, it was kind of the only thing of its kind on television, but in the process, it completely redefined the interest, the popular demand for these epic, fantastical shows. And all you have to do is look at the shows that have followed since Game of Thrones' conclusion. We have series like The Witcher on Netflix, His Dark Materials on HBO, The Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime, Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. And while it hasn't been released yet, and it's actually not based on any pre-existing material, we have the new Rebel Moon series coming out from Zack Snyder. Is that a series? I lied. It's films. Interesting. Okay, it goes to show what I know. This is what I mean when I say take everything I say with a fat grain of salt, because I don't even know what I'm talking about half the time. And this is just a select handful for the sake of an example. There's been a boom of other sci-fi and fantasy shows and series across all of these platforms. But I think they're becoming increasingly popular because our real world is increasingly starting to feel more like something that you would read about or watch in a science fiction piece. Things can feel pretty grim at times, and so we naturally retreat to sci-fi fantasy. For myself personally, used to feel like just an escape. You know, you want to explore a new world, you want to get out of your own life for a hot second and go play some Star Wars Battlefront, you know what I'm saying? But interestingly, you know, with the onset of recent events, according to psychologist Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who is the director of the Media Psychology Research Center, she spoke to the fact that Contagion, I think, was like the most popular movie, totally retrended on Netflix during 2020, and she pointed out that it makes us feel like we're not alone, and there's resolution to these stories so we can express our anxiety that way. Whether it's zombie movies or Contagion, any thriller ramps up a lot of anxiety and fear that then gets resolved by the end. So what used to be kind of just like an escape into a new world is now kind of relatable. We see that with, you know, The Last of Us. Granted, it's a much more extreme, true apocalyptic take, but look at how popular that show freaking was. And that brings me to the next point. It does not hurt to see predecessors like The Witcher and The Last of Us, and that's just two examples, performing really well in the streaming space. Last of Us being, of course, a more recent example. It outperformed House of the Dragon. When The Last of Us season finale aired, NPR reported that the HBO hit outperformed the network's latest show of a similar scale, House of the Dragon. And according to Forbes, here are a bunch of classic HBO shows that haven't scored as high as what we're seeing from The Last of Us here. And it goes on to list all of these incredibly popular. It's not like these shows are chopped liver over here. These are all other extremely successful series, incredibly beautifully well done shows from HBO that The Last of Us still reviewed better than. So having success like what we've seen with The Witcher debuting at like #1 on Netflix when it launched, and The Last of Us cleaning up clearly the rest of these other HBO productions, it really goes to show that video games and those stories can perform especially successfully when adapted from the game to live action. And it's also just worth noting that video game storylines in general are often just really well written. The Last of Us, not to linger on that, but that game, my personal opinion, was life-altering. The story was one of a kind, like truly just never felt anything like that before when I played the game. And it doesn't hurt that a lot of these games have, I would say, an average of what, like a 10-hour at least campaign of content and material to play through. So not only is that a lot of great source material to draw from, you could easily, of course, fill an entire series worth of 8 to 10 episodes with content just from the game right there. It's all there for you. But video games often, I feel like, have lots of great twists and turns because you need to have a storyline that would occupy 10 hours worth of gameplay, again, if not more. Now, my biggest inhibition going into The Last of Us was there is a level of investment that you can achieve when you're actively playing the game. Most of these you are in first-person POV, you get really attached to the characters. In some cases, like The Last of Us, you get to play as multiple characters, which truly heightens your passion for them, your feelings towards them. And so you inevitably become deeply invested. And even though that was an inhibition of mine going in, The Last of Us proved that they could easily translate, for that game especially in particular. You're literally petrified when you're playing the game. At least I was. It's terrifying, and I feel like they were able to successfully recapture that and create it in the television series to the point that I still was on the edge of my seat, even though I knew everything that was going to happen. Even though I had all the spoilers, they totally were able to really dial in on what makes the video game so great when you're actively playing it. And so I have absolutely no problem if this is going to be the next big boom in Hollywood, across the stream streaming platforms. I am not opposed to that in any way, shape, or form, but I think the biggest challenge is, can you recreate that feeling of investment and being totally deeply absorbed into the game that you feel when you're actively playing it? Will it always cross over so successfully into live action? Can every adaptation really achieve that same level of success and being true to the story while appealing to the pre-existing fan base? There is the inherent challenge of you're dealing with something that people really love and cherish. Definitely have to make them happy whilst garnering some new fans. I think that's a true marker for success. Hopefully that's an outcome of all of these video game to live action adaptations. Shout out to all of my sources. Again, I will leave these down in the description below, but this is something that I really wanted to discuss and hear your guys' thoughts. It's clearly, I think this is inevitable and the wave is coming, but do let me know if you're excited for any of these that I listed and what your thoughts are on the incoming alleged boom of video games taking over the film and television scene. I really want to hear what you guys think. Hope you guys are doing so well as always, and I will see you guys again very, very soon. Bye, guys.